Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 2000's Represent. We're still in 2002. In this episode, we're talking about a movie, and that movie is going to be Spider-Man, the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man film from 2002, first film in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. So we got sequels in 2004 and 2007. Just a very fun film. Remember seeing this back in theaters. Watched it again recently on Disney Plus, and I want to say a couple years ago it got re-released, and I think they re-released all of the Spider-Man movies. So all the Tobey Maguire films, all of the Andrew Garfield films, and then the Tom Holland films. So I had already seen all of those, like in theaters before. So, but the only ones that I hadn't seen for a while were Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. We didn't go to Spider-Man 3 or any of the other ones. But yeah, we saw this one in the theaters back in, I think it was 2023. And then went to see Spider-Man 2 like a week later. I think they did them like one a week for 8 weeks or however many films they've done. And those were a lot of fun. So I definitely feel like this one is more closer to kind of the original comics. And it's kind of funny because you have I think the Tobey Maguire films are very much your street level Spider-Man stories, and then you get I would say the Andrew Garfield ones are kind of in that vein as well. They veer a little like to the more kind of fantastical, and then the Tom Holland ones I think definitely stray away from the street level story stuff, with the exception being maybe Homecoming. Homecoming feels like a very street level Spider-Man movie, but No Way Home, or was it Far From Home and No Way Home, like feel like they go much further into like the multiverse and like space and stuff like that. So there's like different flavors of Spider-Man films depending on which actor you're watching, which director is directing, and so on. But yeah, this one still holds up. Some of the CG looks a little bit dated now. But aside from that, it's still a really fun movie. I remember seeing this opening day in 2002, and I think the biggest movie I saw that I remember going to up to this point was probably Star Wars Episode 1. And we had bought tickets for that one like weeks in advance, and there was just a ton of people outside the theater, and it was at a different theater, so I kind of have a different memory of that one, because we actually had to go down to, we drove to a larger theater to see that one. This one I just saw at my main local theater when it came out. But this was the first movie that I got to, or that I went to, where I showed up, like really early. And by that, probably being like at least an hour early, because there was already people outside of the theater kind of just waiting to get tickets for the first showing, or whatever time it was, like maybe like 1 or 2 in the afternoon on I think it was like a Friday or something like that. But yeah, waited out there, just talked to a lot of like people, and it was the first time, probably the only time at that theater where I remember kind of just like having like almost like you're like camping out essentially, not for that long, maybe like an hour or two or something like that. Because it was the days before like reserved seating, or you can order tickets online. Even the more recent Star Wars films, I've always gotten like ordered those tickets ahead of time. So like you're not showing up to the theater and hoping you can get tickets. That's definitely a bygone thing. But yeah, hanging out in the theater with everybody before the movie and just kind of talking to random people after the movie was a really cool experience. We're going to get into the notes for this movie. So I have my notes right here. I'm just going to get that notebook open and start going through it. And like I said, I saw it in 2002. Picked it up on DVD when it came out. I think the end of that year. Watched it on DVD maybe once or twice. And then, again, saw it recently in theaters a couple years ago. And then watched it again recently on Disney Plus. So let's see where we're at here. So we have next page. Should be, if I can actually open, there we go. So, Spider-Man. Anyway, first released May 3rd, 2002. Like I said, kind of the story about waiting outside the theater to see it. And I feel this is a kind of pivotal movie in the comic movie kind of subgenre. We had some decent comic book movies before this. So we had the the Schumacher Batman, or not the Schumacher. Yeah, we had Schumacher, the Tim Burton Batmans, and then the Joel Schumacher Batmans, which I think the Tim Burton ones were pretty well received. The Schumacher ones, I think we have a more of a reverence for them now, like looking back on them like nostalgically. But when those came out, they did not get like well received necessarily. They made decent money, but I think after Batman and Robin, I remember like being kind of like seeing Batman and Robin in '97 and kind of being turned off from comic book movies because I'm like, this movie is silly. It's kind of dumb. But I think now we look back on those movies and be like, okay, we have different flavors of Batman. So we have your kind of silly Batman films with the Schumacher films. You have your super serious Christopher Nolan Batmans, and then you have your kind of darker, less serious than the Nolan ones, but more dark than the Schumachers with Tim Burton. So it kind of depends on what kind of like version of Batman you want to go with, and that's kind of perfect because the comics also have this where some writers will write a darker story, some writers will be a little more on the silly side, and so on. But yeah, this movie I would say is probably one of the most pivotal comic book movies because I think if this movie did not do well, both critically and commercially, it could have kind of been the end for a lot of other comic book films that came after. So, a couple other movies that need to be mentioned in kind of establishing this resurgence in the films. I mean, not resurgence is the wrong word because there's only a few years between Batman and Robin and this. But we have Blade and we have X-Men, which showed you could do a good comic book movie, even an R-rated one in that case with the case of Blade. And then you could adapt something like X-Men and have that be good as well. But I think Spider-Man was kind of the one where a lot of it was hanging on Spider-Man because Spider-Man is probably like the biggest or one of the biggest superheroes. I know people have been waiting a very, very long time to get this movie. I don't think there was any Spider-Man film before this, with the exception of maybe some made-for-TV stuff. Because I vaguely remember seeing one of the made-for-TV movies. It may have been the one from 1977, and it was okay. But I remember like seeing it on TV. But it's kind of cheesy now. But yeah, this one is just a very important film in that genre. And then I think kind of like going forward, we got a lot more comic book films that were very, very good. Like a year later, we got X-Men 2. A year after X-Men 2, we got Spider-Man 2. Probably my favorite one of the Spider-Man. Probably my favorite Spider-Man film overall. That's where it's just Spider-Man. And then we got Batman Begins a year after that. A couple of years later, we got The Dark Knight. So I feel a lot of that happened because this Spider-Man movie was successful. See here. So we have apparently development on this started back in the 70s. So in 1975, and it kind of like the rights there was a lot of rights issues going on, so they were never able to like get anything kind of like nailed down until they got this one started. Apparently, James Cameron had met with Stan Lee at one point to try to develop an X-Men movie, and I think Stan Lee has commented to James Cameron that he would be a better director for a Spider-Man film. So James Cameron, I think, at one point was writing a Spider-Man film. Apparently, it was really dark. And Corlaco, I think, is the production company. I think it's a production company that was behind like Terminator 2. And I think James Cameron had just finished doing True Lies when he started developing this Spider-Man film. But then they were never able to get the rights to it, and then he ended up just going on to work on Titanic instead. So he started doing Titanic. There was just a bunch of people that were considered for directing. Let me actually just bring this list up because it's kind of extensive. So some directors that were considered were Roland Emmerich from Independence Day. You have John DeBont from Speed, Chris Columbus, Barry Summerfield, Tim Burton, Michael Bay, Ang Lee, David Fincher, Tony Scott, and M. Night Shyamalan were at least considered. I think Tim Burton turned it down because basically he had already done two DC movies. And then who else do we have? John DeBont would have been an interesting choice, and I think David Fincher's a great director. I just don't know if he would be able to do a superhero movie because he did Seven, The Social Network, Fight Club, stuff like that. But we get into our casting for. Let me bring up my list for Peter Parker. So obviously went to Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire, I think, is like was at the time a perfect candidate for this role. But other people that were considered were Leonardo DiCaprio, Freddie Prinze Jr., Chris O'Donnell, Jude Law, Chris Klein, Ewan McGregor, Wes Bentley, and Heath Ledger. Apparently, I think DiCaprio ended up like going to work with obviously Cameron on Titanic, and then in the role of Mary Jane, we had let me see here. We had Kate Bosworth, Elijah Dushku, Jimmy King, and Mina Suvari from was it American Beauty, I think. And let me just bring up the casting list for potential people for the Green Goblin. You had Nicolas Cage, Jason Isaacs, John Malkovich, and Billy Bob Thornton were also considered for that role. But it went to Willem Dafoe, and I think this is one of Willem Dafoe's most iconic roles. Like he's incredible in it because he does the like sadistic version of Norman Osborn very well as the version of Norman Osborn that doesn't really know what's going on. So he plays those. He plays both of those, like split personality, perfectly. And I think this is the third movie I saw with him in it. So I remember back like in the mid '90s, I watched Platoon with my friend, and he's in that. And then like a year later, he was like well, Platoon's from the '80s, but like my friend had it on like VHS, so we watched it. And then he was in I think a year after that, I saw Speed 2. Speed 2 is a pretty bad movie. Like Speed is an incredible movie. Speed 2 is just pretty awful. The best part of it though is Willem Dafoe as the villain. He kind of makes some of the stuff. He brings it up a little bit for me, just with like how committed he is to this role. He's got like leeches on him and stuff. It's weird. I need to rewatch Speed 2. Maybe I don't, but like it was just really bad. But he was like, you can take Willem Dafoe and put him in a bad movie, and it makes it a little bit better. So I think that was the case with Speed 2. And then he was in this, and then of course he's gone on to do stuff like The Lighthouse, which is incredible. We talked about American Psycho on this series. The beginning, like I think like the very first film we covered on this series was American Psycho. He's in that. Yeah, and he's incredible in the role of Norman Osborn. So he's great. Oh, what else we got here? We did that. Oh, apparently there were, before we get to our plot, there were teaser trailers and I think posters that had the World Trade Center in them, which they obviously filmed that and got that underway before those attacks happened. And then I think the trailer is available. You can see the trailer online, but they ended up getting rid of that trailer and then just photoshopping out the reflection of that in Spider-Man's like mask because it's like reflected in his eye kind of thing. But yeah, before we get to our plot, yeah, just oh yeah. Also, we can't talk about the cast without talking about J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson again. Just kind of chews the scenery when he's there. Just incredible role for him. May have been the first thing I remember seeing him in. I may have seen him in something before that. But yeah, he's great in this one. Obviously, great in even better in the second one. But yeah, basically perfect casting, I think, on your kind of primary characters. Peter Parker, Tobey Maguire did a very good job. I think Tom Holland is a better modern version of Peter Parker, but I think if you're trying to do the kind of maybe not 1960s style, but like the not like basically the style that they went for at the time with this Spider-Man, I think Tobey Maguire was perfect. Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane is great. Even I'm not a huge fan of James Franco, but he's good in this as well. And then of course you have like Cliff Robertson as is it Robinson or Robertson? Let me actually just bring up the cast here. Yeah, Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben. You have Rosemary Harris as Aunt May, and like the supporting cast is all great as well. But yeah, it basically felt like a Spider-Man comic like come to life basically, and I think that's kind of all that fans really wanted, because like the fans had waited a very long time to get this movie, and there was a lot of pressure, I think, and like a lot of high expectations from the pressure on the studio and high expectations for the fans that this movie be like accurate to the source material, and I think it was. So we got that. Now we're going to get to our plot of the film. So plot of the film basically is, let me just close that up. So Peter Parker does a monologue about being in love with Mary Jane. He's like, it's all about a girl. They go to like I think it's like Columbia University, and they're studying these spiders. There's three types of spider. Like one can like jump, one can create really strong webs, and one has like the spider sense. And then they fuse that DNA into a fourth like super spider. There's supposed to be like 15 of them, and there's only 14. One of them is missing. One of them comes down and eventually bites Peter Parker and becomes Spider-Man. That's essentially the basics of the thing. He goes to school with Harry Osborn, who is the son of Norman Osborn from Oscorp. Norman Osborn is under pressure to get this glider exoskeleton and performance enhancers ready to be field tested on make almost like a super soldier serum maybe. But his scientist, the guy who's like working with him, is like, no, we gotta take it back to formula. It's not ready. So eventually, what happens is Norman Osborn, kind of the same thing that Doctor Octopus does, like tests the thing on himself to make sure it works. Like I think like in Spider-Man 2, Doctor Octopus is testing the particle accelerator thing and ends up. They're like, oh, like everything's within parameters, and then it, of course, isn't. Same thing with this one. Norman Osborn takes the performance enhancers, and it completely messes with him, turns him into the villainous Green Goblin. Spider-Man, before becoming Spider-Man, gets into a fight at school. He's also supposed to help his uncle paint the kitchen, which he blows off to experiment with his newfound powers of climbing buildings and swinging from webs, or it's the organic webs in this one, not the mechanical. I think I like mechanical a little bit more, as far as like them. Like it really doesn't matter, but I think I'm more of a fan of the mechanical like web fluid web shooters. Anyhow, so he starts messing around with his powers, and then he gets into a fight at school where the spider sense kicks in, and he ends up beating up Flash Thompson. He punches him like once, and that's it. Basically, knocks him out. But he blows off doing the painting the kitchen, and he blows that off, and then hangs out with Mary Jane outside. I think like talking about, because her dad is like yelling at her and stuff like that. But Flash shows up in a new car, and then Peter Parker starts reading through the thing, like looking for like to buy a car of his own. And he sees an advertisement in the newspaper for amateur wrestling. It's like, hey, $3,000 if you can last, like, what is it, 3 minutes in the ring. So he starts designing a costume, and a lot of these are homages to the Spider-Man suit, some of the original suits he's worn throughout the ages and stuff. One thing I want to mention, which I noticed was in the notes, but I forgot to mention it. I'll mention it here. I remember when Sam Raimi was announced as the director for this, and that felt like, to me, was like a huge win for like film nerds, because up to that point, I think his most well-known stuff was probably the Evil Dead movies, and I'm a huge fan of those. They were kind of a cult classic. I think they're definitely blown up beyond like what a cult classic now. But yeah, at the time, that felt like just like a huge kind of win, because like it's like this guy who's directing these movies that I know about, but maybe my friends know about, maybe not everybody knows about him, is directing this huge, big budget Spider-Man film. And then, of course, he's gone on to direct like other big films, like some of the like Doctor Strange, as well as like I liked the Wizard of Oz movie he did, Oz the Great and Powerful. I thought that was interesting. But this felt like the first time, like the first big, huge film that he worked on. He may have worked on something else before that, but. Anyhow, back to the plot. So he is kind of pulling off his responsibilities. His uncle drives him. He says he's going to the library. He's lying because he's going to the wrestling thing. His uncle drives him into the city, and they have the talk about with great power comes great responsibility. He's like, hey, like if there's stuff going on, you can like talk to us about it. And he kind of blows Uncle Ben off. He's like, and Uncle Ben's like, all right, I'll be back here to pick you up at 10. And he blows it off, goes to the wrestling thing. Ends up, we have a cameo from Bruce Campbell as the ring announcer. He's like, He's like, "What's your name?" He's like, "I'm like the human, like I forget what we call it, like a human spider." And he's like, "Nah, that name's bad. How about the Amazing Spider-Man?" So he goes out. We got a great cameo from Macho Man Randy Savage's Bonesaw. It's like Bonesaw is ready. Just a great scene, and Macho Man does a great job in this. But Spider-Man ends up meeting him due to his spider sense and like uh, better like reflexes and the fact that he's able to like kind of just like knock him out. But then the promoter stiffs him on the money. He like gives him 100. He's like, "Hey, the ad said it was 3 grand." Peter Parker's like, "What's the deal?" And he's like, "That's a 3 grand. If you the last 3 minutes, you beat him in two. You're lucky I give you this $100 or whatever it was." And he takes the money and leaves. And this guy comes in and robs the promoter. And this is very important for it pays off like right away. But the promoter's like, "Hey, stop that guy. He's got my money." And um, Peter Parker lets the guy go. He's like, "All right, cool." And he's like, "Hey man, that was my money." And Peter Parker's like, "I don't see how that's my problem," because that's kind of like what he said when he's like, "Hey, I need this money." He's like, "Not my problem." So he goes out to meet his uncle. His uncle's been carjacked and shot, and basically like dies moments later. And then they get a police radio call about the car where the carjacker is, and Spider-Man chases him down. The police are chasing him down, and then Peter Parker realizes that the guy who killed his uncle is the same guy that he let get out of that building with the money. So kind of like by inaction and not stopping the guy when he could, he caused the death of his uncle. And that's a like, sorry, I think if you're quoting the Spider Verse films, it's like one of those canon events, like a thing that like absolutely has to happen for Spider Man to become Spider Man. So um, that goes off, um, and there's like a funeral for him and all that kind of stuff. And Peter Parker like graduates high school. Obviously, Uncle isn't there. And then while this is going on, Green Goblin is doing some of his own stuff. Like he goes to, I think it's called Quest, the like competing company. He shows up there with the glider and blows up the the test site, like the military is working on. Blows that up. I think he starts rooming with Harry at in college. Um, I must say Gwen Stacy. Mary Jane is now like a waitress. She wants to be an actress, but she is trying to like go to auditions and stuff like that. After that, we there's a like our montage of street level Spider-Man stopping like purse snatchers and robbers and stopping criminals like that from doing stuff. It's a great montage, and then he ends up going to because they want the Daily Bugle wants pictures of Spider-Man, so Peter Parker eventually provides those. We get the great scenes with J. Jonah Jameson. He's like, "Oh crap! I'll give you 300 for him," or whatever it was. Um, and then he's like talking on the phone with his like wife about it. She's like, "Hey, your wife wants to know which piece of furniture to get." He's like, "Whatever's cheaper." It's like, yeah, and J. Jonah Jameson is great. J.K. Simmons is like really brings the character to life in this movie. But then the Green Goblin, eventually Norman Osborn is like basically like, "Well, Quest is gone. Like we have all these like government contracts now." And the board of directors is like, "Well, like we're like Quest Aerospace or whatever it was is buying us out, and they're buying the company, and unfortunately they want you like out. So like basically it's like they're buying the company, but you're not going to be part of it going forward." And obviously the Green Goblin takes huge uh, has a huge problem with that. So he shows up at the like festival where all the board of directors are there, and there's like a bunch of like I want to say hot air balloons, but like the big balloons you see at like the like Thanksgiving Day parade are there, and the Green Goblin comes and wrecks shop, and Spider Man is there to stop him. There's some more interactions with Mary Jane throughout the movie. We get the iconic upside down kiss when she gets assaulted by like some muggers and things. And that alley was actually filmed at I think the back lot at Warner Brothers. So it's a Columbia Pictures movie. But and the tour guide actually pointed this out. He's like we're at the Warner Brothers studios, but like he's like but Sony like that's a Sony film, and he talked about how Sony contracted out to use like there's like a back alley like lot essentially or set, and the upside down kiss scene was filmed in that alley. That alley's been used in a bunch of other shows and movies as well. But probably the most iconic one is like you can kind of see if you've ever been to the Warner Studios backlot, and then you watch this movie, you'll see exactly where it was. But they do the iconic upside down kiss. She starts dating Harry, who like he's like, hey Peter, you never made a move on her, like sorry. Yeah, but they start doing stuff, and Peter there's eventually a part where Green Goblin wants to essentially recruit Peter or recruit Spider-Man to help him. So there's like a building that's on fire. Spider-Man rescues some kids, like a baby, and then there's one more person in there, and it's like Green Goblin in like a robe or whatever, and Green Goblin turns around and sprays gas on Spider-Man and knocks him out. And he's like, "Hey, think about it, like you and I could like run this town, kind of thing." Spider-Man obviously does not go for this, and then it is the scene where Norman Osborn figures out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man is just one of the most like kind of terrifying scenes I can think of in these kind of movies. So in their fight, are like basically these blades get kind of spun and like they cut Spider-Man's like arm, like cut his arm like that. Uh, sorry. So yeah, they cut his arm, and then like it's Thanksgiving, and he is in his room in his apartment, and they all go up there, and he's kind of just like hanging on the ceiling, and it gets out, but a drop of blood lands on the ground, and it kind of like sets off, like it gets the goblin like out basically, and then like the rest of the scene, the Green Goblin is just like all upset, but basically Norman Osborn figures it out. And he's telling Harry that he's like oh, he's in love with Mary Jane. So I don't know if the Green Goblin ever told Harry that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, because I think he does figure it out eventually. But because at the end of the movie, Harry Osborn's like, I'm gonna like avenge my dad's death. I'm gonna find out who Spider-Man is. You would think Green Goblin maybe would have told him, but I don't know. But basically, he goes to Aunt May's house. The Green Goblin terrorizes her, and then kidnaps Mary Jane. So then, and there's like the scene where like Peter Parker realizes that the Green Goblin knows who he is, and then you get the kind of the choice scene where it's either save your girlfriend or this tram full of kids gets dropped into the water. And it's kind of the scene where like basically like New York stands together, like the Green Goblin is doing that, and a bunch of New Yorkers are like throwing stuff on him. But he is able to rescue both the kids and rescue Mary Jane, and then they have their final kind of showdown, where basically it appears that the Green Goblin's personality has subsided, but Norman Osborn is basically trying to get the glider ready to go, and Spider-Man jumps over it. The glider impales the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin is dead, and then it goes to the funeral for Norman Osborn, where Harry's like, "Hey, I'm gonna like find out who Spider-Man is, and I'm gonna kill Spider-Man from doing this to my dad." And then Mary Jane eventually realizes that she's in love with Peter Parker. So she kind of pours out her heart to Peter Parker. Peter Parker's like, "Sorry, I can't be with you." More of like if I am with you, my enemies can like get after you, and so on. So kind of like not going out with her for her protection basically, and for like the protection of like plenty of like other people as well. And that's where our movie ends. But yeah, it's just a good comic book movie. I definitely think the second one is better, because like that one is like, this one was really good. Spider-Man 2 is like just like incredible, and I highly recommend watching both. Spider-Man 3 is okay. I didn't love that they put Venom in there. Like Venom's an iconic villain in Spider-Man, but they also at the time still had a ton of other iconic villains that they could have went with. They could have went with Vulture, or they could have went with like Chameleon, or any of these other like villains up to that point. Also, not changing Venom's voice from Topher Grace's voice when he's Eddie Brock to Venom was weird. But so I would say the first two Spider-Man movies are really good. The second one's incredible. Third one, just okay. But yeah, Spider-Man 2, like my favorite thing of Spider-Man 2 is like the fact that Spider-Man is like absent for like 20 minutes of the movie, where it's just Peter Parker being Peter Parker. Kind of gives up Spider-Man for a while. But yeah, Spider-Man is a lot of fun. It's streaming on Disney Plus. I highly recommend checking it out. It was a huge deal when it came out, and I think, like I said, paved the way for a lot of like future comic book movies to be made. But that is going to do it for this episode. We'll be back in back in a few days, back in a week, with our 2002 video game. I have no idea what that's going to be, but we'll be back in a week with that, and then we'll be jumping into 2003. So, thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.